Home inspections. We're taking a deep dive into home inspections as a part of the purchase and sale of our home. For sellers, they need to know what the buyers are going to be checking in their home, and for the buyers, these are the inspections or the due diligence you're doing on the property before you buy the home. So you've already put an offer on the property, you have elected a contingency, which is a home inspections contingency, and you're going to deep dive into this home inspections contingency today. So first of all, what kind of inspections are we doing here? So the first one and the most important and the biggest one is the home inspection. The home inspection is kind of like visiting a general practitioner. They're giving you an annual checkup and getting a feel for your entire body. So the inspectors here get a feel for the entire house. They check on everything from the roof down to all the way to the basement. They check on the plumbing, the electric, they are checking the windows, they're checking the appliances. But most importantly, they're making sure that there are no leaks, there are no electrical safety hazards. There is a whole code, there's a building code that builders are supposed to follow, and the inspectors are supposed to check on those codes. Even the township has certain codes. So they check all those specific things, and then they give you a report with all the pictures and their comments on what they noticed in the home. So this is a pretty comprehensive view of the entire house. For a seller, there may be some surprises that you didn't know about the house. Sometimes you live in a house all these years and you may never know what comes up. And for the buyer, of course, it's very important to understand what the condition of the home is, especially if you're a first-time buyer. Like a good home inspector will also explain maintenance and other things about the home as they go along. So I highly recommend that a buyer should attend the home inspections and understand their home, especially if it's a first-time buyer. So that was home inspections. They even check on appliances that are going to stay. They can give you dates of, the furnaces or AC units and things like that, which you can gauge how old they are. They can even tell you the age of the roof approximately based on what they see in terms of wear and tear. So it's a good indication of if there are any big ticket items that you need to spend money on in future. So it's a great, overall assessment that you can make of the home. Another inspection is termite. In all the years, in about 13 plus years that I have been doing business, I have not had active termite activity in maybe one home of all the homes that we've bid on. But that doesn't mean anything. If a home is in the woods, if there's a lot, if there's a wraparound deck which is really old, a lot of wood surrounding the property, and if the property is out there on a large acreage in the woods, you definitely don't want to skip this inspection. The termite inspection is important, and it's good to know, and it's very accurate. Remediating termites is not as intimidating, but it's good to know ahead of time. Radon, that is the third most popular inspection that most people do on their homes, and I have a whole separate video on radon. You can check it out. The link is in the description below. Then another set of inspections are well, septic, and stucco. These are the other popular ones in our area. The well and septic are for the homes that have an on-site well and an on-site septic tank. For those that have public water and sewer, for the most part, we're not worried. There are some exceptions, but we'll not talk about them right now. But for the most part, if you have public water and sewer to the property, we're not really inspecting them. Stucco is something that has become a concern, especially the stucco that was put up in the 90s. And there are special stucco tests that can be done if you're buying a property which has stucco. I highly recommend that you do a stucco test. There are several ways in which you can test. There are moisture meters that check the the moisture levels in a wall. But there's also what they call an invasive stucco test, where they're actually drilling a hole into the stucco in very strategic locations to make sure that the substrate, what's inside, what's behind the surface that you see has not deteriorated and it's not rotted, and that's an important inspection. So this was the stucco, well, and septic. Then there are some other inspections that are included in the Pennsylvania Association of Realtor forms. One happens to be property and flood insurance. Now, if most people would need a mortgage when you buy a home and the lender requires that you have a property insurance on the home, and the lender, if you're in a FEMA floodplain, the lender requires that you have a flood insurance as well. In a lot of cases, if you are in a low-lying area close to a stream or whatever, even if the FEMA maps don't require it, you may want to get an additional supplemental flood insurance because that is not typically covered by a regular insurance. And the property insurance piece, again, there are exceptions to the rule. Most people, a lot of people do waive this inspection, but one exception would be when there has been a lot of insurance claims on the property, and then the next person that owns the property has to pay a higher premium because this property has had too many claims on it. And you can get that by the clue report, but those are some of the details saved for another video. Another set of inspections that you can do is deed restrictions and zoning. There are some communities which were, when the builder built them, the builder insisted on having some deed restrictions on the properties, like you can't have a shed, you have to have a garden in the backyard. Now, these are some of the things you can only get once when your title company pulls the deed on the property. So this is something that the sellers are aware of, and if you are aware as a seller that you have deed restrictions, share that with your realtor, with your listing agent ahead of time, so it is something that even the buyers are aware of when they're putting in the offer. If you're in an HOA or a condo association, that's a whole other video. You can check out my HOA video. The link is in the description below. So another couple of inspections that we would consider that are in the Pennsylvania Association of Realtors forms are lead-based paint and property boundaries. So if you're buying a large acreage or a home which is sitting on a large acreage, you want to know where your property boundaries are. In a regular neighborhood, in a smaller home, in maybe in a community, it is easy to see where the boundaries are. There are times when I have said, well, you see the way the grass is cut, that differs, that's where your property boundaries lie. But that is for smaller lots. Now, if you're buying a large lot, I would want to know if where the property boundaries are, and you would get a surveyor to do that, and that's the election, and that's the inspection you want to elect. And lead-based paint. In 1978, the government passed a rule where you could not have lead in the paints that people used to paint their homes. So any property that was built before 1978, it is recommended that you do a lead-based paint inspection and make sure, because it is lead, is considered a health hazard, which we didn't know back then, but we know now. In our area in northern Chester County and parts of Montgomery and Delaware County, there are not many older homes that have a concern, because even if you had lead paint in the home before, it has been painted over. Now we're talking 2023, so it's been many years. So unless your child is like chewing on that paint or something like that, it is not as much of a hazard anymore, because that paint has completely been covered by the newer paint, which doesn't have lead. But if this is something that concerns you, if you have allergies or something, this is definitely something to look at, right? So these are the standard inspections that are done. The biggest piece about the home inspection is, like I mentioned, it was a general practitioner. If they see something that is a cause for concern, they may ask you to bring in an expert, right? So if they see mold in the home, they may say, this looks like mold. If I were you, get a professional mold inspection done. If they see a crack in the basement that is wider than a certain size, they're like, well, this crack worries me, and you might want a structural engineer to take a look at it. So there are these specific inspections that you may be asked to do if there are issues in homes that the inspector notices. So this is home inspection, folks. These are all the inspections that you do typically in a residential home in Pennsylvania, in the northern Chester County, Montgomery and Delaware counties, where I do most of my business. The other thing about home inspection is the time frame, because remember, time is of the essence in a real estate transaction. So you want to put a contingency in the contract, and the default is 10 days. So you are expected to do all these inspections within 10 days, and then There is 5-day negotiation period where the buyer and seller may negotiate what the seller is willing to fix, what the buyer is willing to do and accept. And then there are 2 days for the buyer to decide if they still want the house. So the first thing is inspections a contingency of purchase? If yes, how many days is it going to be conducted in? And then for a seller, there is a time frame within which you can actually get contractor estimates and all and decide this is what you're willing to fix, this is what you're not willing to fix, and then it's a back and forth, and then the buyer decides if that is acceptable to them. Another thing about inspections is, I mentioned before, it is a buyer beware, and so get everything done before you settle, because you can't really go back after settlement and say, hey, this is what I discovered in the inspection report and I needed it fixed. Doesn't quite hold much weight. The seller's disclosure, however, is the only document that survives settlement, and there will be a whole other video on seller's disclosure later. Subscribe to my channel, follow me on social media channels, and you will get a ding when I publish that video. So hope this was helpful, folks. This is taking the fear out of inspections, what inspections are being done and why you do them and what exactly is being checked. Now, in a strong seller's market, waiving inspections has become a thing. So there's a link in the description below that talks about waiving home inspections and my strategies and making that a stressless and a much more educated and an informed process. Check that out.